kia ora koutou. I'm Andrew Digby. I'm the scientist for the Kākāpō and the Tākehē programs here in Aotearoa near New Zealand, and I'm going to talk today about the Kākāpō. So the Kākāpō is this big bird. It's a very unusual bird, only found in New Zealand, and I guess a lot of you probably won't have seen a Kākāpō or know what a Kākāpō is. So this is a Kākāpō. It's a parrot, but it's a really, really weird parrot. It's the heaviest parrot in the world. It's the only flightless parrot in the world. It's nocturnal. It's got a load of really weird features. It's got like the slowest metabolism of any bird in the world. It does everything very, very slowly. It's got a breathing system that no other parrot has. And it's basically, yeah, it's not really a bird. It's a bit more like, say, a badger or a wombat or something of the forest, but one that climbs trees. So yeah, very, very strange, only found in New Zealand. And they've been around for a long, long time. They split away from their nearest relatives about 30 million years ago. And I just give you a little bit of a history about Kākāpō in New Zealand, because Kākāpō used to be everywhere. This is New Zealand. They used to be all over the whole country. There used to be probably hundreds of thousands of them. They were one of the most common birds in New Zealand. And so much so that in the 1850s or so, or 60s, when the European early settlers were arriving, it was pretty common for them when they were in their camps in the forest, in the bush, to have a tame Kākāpō at their campsite. And they used to complain that at night they couldn't sleep because the Kākāpō was so noisy, screeching in the tents around them, screeching in the trees around them. But humans brought some visitors to New Zealand that weren't very welcome. They brought cats, they brought things like ferrets and stoats and weasels. And these mammals didn't used to be in New Zealand. So the birds that were here did not have defenses against these mammals when they arrived. So these mammals, and also things like dogs and humans hunting and clearing habitat, wiped out a lot of New Zealand's native species and mostly a lot of their birds when people arrived. And that happened to the Kākāpō. And so from going everywhere throughout the country, by around about just over 100 years ago, there were hardly any Kākāpō left. And by the 1970s, so about 50 years ago, a lot of people thought they were extinct. And so a group of people got together and they searched some of the more remote places in New Zealand, places like Fiordland in the southwest tip of the South Island, and places like Rakiura or Stewart Island down here. And they were looking in mountainous territory, something like this. And they actually found some Kākāpō, but the Kākāpō were just clinging on. They were clinging on to places like this. This is where this particular bird was found. This is quite a famous bird called Richard Henry. He was 1,000 meters up this cliff, just clinging on to the places where the cats couldn't get to them, where the stoats couldn't get to them. And another population was found in Rakiura, Stewart Island, right at the far south of the country, but they were getting eaten by cats. And as fast as the people could find them, the cats were eating them. So Kākāpō were just about to become extinct. Again, they'd been found, but they were about to become extinct. And so something had to be done. And the solution that came up with was to move them to safe places, to safe offshore islands where there were none of these pests, where there were no cats or rats or stoats, where those animals hadn't either got there or had been cleared off those islands. And so that's where we are today. So Kākāpō aren't on the mainland of New Zealand today. This is the South Island. And Kākāpō are on these offshore islands around the coast of the south of the South Island of New Zealand. So they're still on these lifeboats. And how many are there? Well, initially when they were found in the 1970s, there was around about 150 of them, but the population was still going down. They weren't reproducing very well at all. And so by the mid-1990s, there was only 51 Kākāpō left in the world. So something really had to be done at this stage. And so what happened then was this group called Kākāpō Recovery was formed, a small dedicated team to try and save the Kākāpō. And since then, the numbers have gone up. In fact, the population's increased by about 4 times since then. And you can see that there's these real step changes where we've had some big increases in the Kākāpō population. So what's sort of caused that turnaround? And I guess the main thing is probably focusing on the breeding of Kākāpō. Kākāpō have got this really weird breeding system. Most birds breed every year, but Kākāpō don't. They only breed every few years when a big tree called the rimu tree produces lots of fruit. Now, this is a big tree. It goes to hundreds and hundreds of years old. It's probably not quite as tall as some of those ones in Tasmania we just saw, but it's still a very, very large tree. And every 2 to 4 years, it masts, what's called masting, or mass produces lots of these little red fruits, these rimu berries. And the rimu is a really special food. It's a bit of a superfood. It's really high in calcium, really high in vitamin D. And Kākāpō feed that to their chicks. So the mother here is feeding her chicks. She's eaten a lot of these berries and she's regurgitating them for her chicks to eat. And the chicks grow very, very fast on this really, really healthy food. But there's a bit of a problem with Kākāpō in that they produce these chicks, they lay the eggs, but a lot of the eggs never become Kākāpō. They never hatch. So out of all the Kākāpō eggs that have been laid, about half of them are infertile. There's nowhere that they'd ever become a chick. And only about a third of them actually turn into a Kākāpō chick. So if a clutch of 3 eggs, 2 of those never normally become a Kākāpō, and only one of them becomes a fledged Kākāpō chick, Kākāpō that leaves the nest. So that's a real problem. And so one of our management, what we try and do is to try and help the Kākāpō as much as we possibly can. And we rely on technology quite a lot to do that. One of the things that we do is every single Kākāpō has a name. Every single Kākāpō's got a little tracker on it, which it wears on its back in a little backpack. That enables us to find the Kākāpō, but also enables us to track their activity. So it's a little bit like every Kākāpō's got a Fitbit on. And then on our islands, we have a series of these data loggers which take the information from those transmitters. We also, when the Kākāpō nest, we do a lot of monitoring. We have a camera in the nest. We have little proximity sensors which tell us what the mother's doing. We have temperature sensors. We have a doorbell on it so we can tell when the mother comes and goes. And we take a lot of care of those chicks. So those chicks get checked mostly every night. We weigh them, we health check them to make sure that they're healthy. And we feed them as well. Like sometimes they need a little bit of help, so we feed the chicks as well to try and give them a little bit of extra boost. And also the Kākāpō, we feed the adults too. And so each Kākāpō mother, she has a little feeding station, which only opens for her. It's controlled by the transmitters. So that enables us to keep the Kākāpō in a healthy weight so that actually we're able to breed and actually produce as many Kākāpō chicks as possible. Also in the setup is a set of scales as well. So when she feeds, we get a weight from her as well. So we can tell what weight she is and we can adjust how much food we give her accordingly. And all of these pieces of information, these devices that we have these data loggers in the nests out on the hillside, the feeding stations, they're all joined together in a bit of what's like a Wi-Fi network. They're all connected together, and then they can send all their information to the internet. So wherever we are in the world, we can check on any Kākāpō and can see things like how active it's been, for example. Because one of the things you'll know is, say, for example, if you're sick, you're not feeling very well, you stay in bed and you don't move around very much. Well, Kākāpō are the same. If they're not feeling very well, they tend to move less. And so we can pick up that signature and we can tell, even if we're not on the island, we can tell this particular Kākāpō is sick, we need to go out there and we need to get that Kākāpō to hospital to get it treated. So that's kind of the really intensive management that we're doing. And that's why that we've been able to turn the Kākāpō population around. So it's going down to those 50 birds, and now it's gone up to 244 Kākāpō today. But this is really, really intensive. And we can't keep doing this. As we get more and more Kākāpō, we can't keep managing every single one individually. So what we'd like to be able to do is just let them go and let them do their own thing. Don't have their transmitters on them. Don't give them all names. So how can we do that? Well, that's one of the things we're looking at. And one of the ways that we're looking at it is to try and see if we can trace Kākāpō in the environment and monitor them without actually catching them. So this is a Kākāpō is bowl. Male Kākāpō, they boom. They inflate themselves to like a football and they make this really deep booming sound to attract the females. And this male is actually clearing out his bowl. He's tidying up his spot. They're very, very fastidious. It's a bit like him tidying his bedroom, and he keeps it really, really clean. But as he's doing this, he's dropping little bits of feather, little bits of skin into the ground. And what we've been working on is to try and use something called DNA testing to be able to see if we can find the Kākāpō in these places. DNA is kind of a bit of it's part of the building blocks of life, basically. It's what we're made up of. Everyone's got their own little unique signature. And so what we're hoping this will be able to do, rather than catching Kākāpō on an island and having them monitored intensively, we're hoping we can just go to an island, get a little cup of soil and look in there for the DNA of the Kākāpō. And that might be able to tell us things like how many Kākāpō on that island, how many males and females, and even which individuals are there. Because ultimately the aim for this is we want to get Kākāpō off of these lifeboat islands, off of the sanctuaries, off of the coast of New Zealand, and back onto the mainland, back into the mountains like this, and even back into the forests around the towns and cities, which is where they used to live. So that's a real sort of quick whistle-stop tour of Kākāpō Conservation.